Hello, hello. Welcome back. Today, I want to talk about briefly how the heart coordinates the cardiac cycle. I know there's a lot of components to the cardiovascular system and how it works. We could talk about all the arteries and veins and how electricity comes to the heart to get the heart stimulated and pumping. And a lot of times when we do that, because it takes so many chapters in an anatomy and physiology books to cover that, there are so many hours of lectures that you have to listen to make it happen. It's easy to forget that all of this stuff is almost instantaneous. So while this will take me about 8 to 10 minutes to talk about with my PowerPoint, all of this is going to happen thousands of times as you watch this video and as I record this video. So I think that's really, really beautiful, and it's an honor to briefly talk about it. So fasten your seatbelts. Let's go. So our goals or our objectives in this brief video are one, to describe how the heart's conduction system starts and spreads electrical signals. And then after that, we're going to identify ECG waves for atrial and ventricular activity, because as we know, the heart is composed of atria, smaller atria, and then much larger ventricles. The ventricles are responsible for pumping blood um, into systemic and pulmonary circulation, and the atrium are responsible for transporting blood from atria to ventricles to get to the rest of the body. From there, I'm going to explain how electrical signals create pressure changes that move the valves in the heart. And then after that, we're going to attempt to look at the Wigger's diagram to connect electrical, mechanical, and valve events. This diagram is really, really complicated, so I'm excited to attack this with you guys. And if there are any errors at all in this video that you guys think I need to fix, I'm excited to hear from you guys. And if you have any suggestions about how to better attack the cardiovascular system, I'm excited to hear that too. So by the end of the video, you should be able to outline the sequence of the full cardiac cycle. And like I said before, there's so many little tiny pieces that it's easy to miss, and we're definitely going to miss in this short video. But it's cool to have like a big idea to help appreciate those small things. So there we go. So before we start talking about electricity, it's definitely a good idea to go over the heart anatomy and how blood flows through the heart and into the rest of the body. So from the superior and inferior vena cava, blood is going to come from systemic circulation, meaning it's coming from the rest of the body, into the right atrium. From the right atrium, it goes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. And then from there, a nice contraction sends that blood through the pulmonary valve and into the pulmonary artery to go to the lungs to be oxygenated. From there, after it's oxygenated, it's going to come back to the heart through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. So from the left atrium, the blood's gonna flow through the mitral valve. From the mitral valve, it gets to the left ventricle, and from there, with a good, nice, strong contraction, that blood goes through the aortic valve into the aorta and is sent through the rest of the valve. So sorry, through the rest of the body. It's important to note just two locations, there are two different types of valves. There are the semilunar valves, and then there are the AV valves, or the atrial ventricular valves. So the atrial ventricular valves are the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve. And it's easy to remember them if you know that if these valves send blood from the atria to the ventricles. So that's why they're called the atrial ventricular valves. And then the other two valves, the semilunar valves, they are the path that blood takes to go to different organs. So the pulmonary valve opens up and sends blood through the lungs, and the aortic valve, like stated before, sends blood through the rest of the body. And this is good to keep in mind for later in the presentation. So from here, I want to talk about the electrical signals in the heart and where they start and where they end. So the sinoatrial node, or the SA node, which I have highlighted in basically hot green marker, so you can't miss it. The SA node is where an electrical signal starts. It's called the pacemaker just simply because of that. A lot of times, like when you hear of somebody who has like a pacemaker in their heart, usually that means the SA node kind of got weaker over time or due to some heart abnormality. And you have this mechanical pacemaker placed inside of you to do the same thing that the SA node has done in the past. So electrical signal starts in the SA node and travels down to the atrioventricular node. So this is right above the tricuspid valve. And if you remember, this is an atrioventricular valve, and this is an atrioventricular node, which is really cool. There's a brief delay of the electrical signal to allow time for the blood to go into the ventricles. And I say time, but it's still instantaneous. Just keep that in mind. So from the AV node, this signal travels through the left and right bundle branches and then down to the Purkinje fibers. And so after every electrical signal or after like an electrical impulse goes through a certain region of the heart, then activity takes place. Um, the electrical signal does not represent the actual activity. It represents the stimulation before activity. So it's for me, it's easy to get those mixed up or pair them into one experience, but they are actually separate things. And we'll dive into more into that in the next slide. So building on this, and this is probably a common diagram, building on this, we need to talk about the electrocardiogram. And I'm definitely talking too fast because I'm getting excited about this stuff. But the electrocardiogram gives us a picture of how the electrical signal in the heart um, kind of sets the tone for an activity and then the activity happens. Like I said before, it's easy to get those mixed up and kind of merge them into one big thing. But in a hospital setting, somebody is hooked up to a 12 lead ECG, you have 10 electro set up kind of like around the heart to give you a good picture, electrical picture of what's going on there, and you get a visual of what's called a ECG complex. And we'll dive into that here quickly. So each wave represents the stimulation of a certain activity. And activity just means we have atrial contraction, atrial relaxation, ventricular contraction, and then ventricular relaxation. And so this is kind of a culmination of all the electrical signals in the heart placed on one graph. So briefly, this the P wave represents atrial depolarization. After depolarization occurs, contraction takes place. So the small P wave is the signal, or yeah, it's the signal or the light switch that tells the atria, hey, you got to contract to send that blood into the ventricles. So once this P wave occurs, then the atria contract and they get their job done. After and these things are instantaneous, even though I'm talking, it doesn't seem like that. These things are near instantaneous. So after a brief period of time, we see this thing called the QRS complex, and this represents ventricular depolarization. This is very large because the ventricles are large, and it's very choppy, or it seems like very choppy because it's in certain regions of the ventricle, and they're huge and complex. So that's why it looks like that. And then after another brief period, we see the T wave, which is ventricular repolarization. Once we see repolarization, that leads to relaxation. What we're not seeing here is atrial repolarization. And that's because, fortunately slash unfortunately, it happens right around the QRS complex. And it's a very small wave. Oops. Yeah, it's a very small wave. So naturally it's overshadowed by the QRS complex. Yay. So we can't just think that electrical signals happen magically, that they come out of nowhere. There are a significant amount of ions involved, which is why you should take your vitamins and minerals. But we need these things in our body so that we can get an action potential going to send an electrical signal through the heart so the heart can pump blood where it needs to go and we don't die. So cardiac cells sit at a resting potential of negative 90 millivolts. It's really odd to think that your body is electrically charged. Just kind of like generators or like our power systems and stuff like that. But our bodies are, yeah, electrically charged. And so to build on that, cardiac cells are set at a resting potential of negative 90 millivolts. That's just what they're chilling at. But if they're chilling, there's no activity going on. So we need to have some interactions, or we need to have some sort of switch to tell the cardiac cell, hey, it's time to go to work. So this switch is called sodium. So sodium ions go into the cardiac cell and get that negative resting potential from negative 90 millivolts all the way up to around 30 millivolts. So once we get to 30 millivolts, we're able to do what we need to do, which is send that signal through the rest of the heart. So at positive 30 millivolts, things start happening. And in order to keep that system going, we have sodium continuing to flow into the cell. And then we have calcium. Calcium is a big mover in the heart, and that helps us sustain this action potential, or to allow the body to keep making action potentials to keep the heart going and telling it, hey, we gotta move, we gotta survive. Like the heart, like the body needs oxygen, and we've got to get it there. So after a period of time, eventually the cardiac cells need to relax. This whole heart movement thing is just thousands and millions and trillions of contractions or relaxations. So we experience depolarization to get things going, but now the cell has to repolarize to relax for a little bit before this cycle happens all over again. And the ions responsible for that relaxation is potassium. So potassium has to leave the cell for order for the cell to get back to its negative resting membrane potential. So that leaves the cell and brings our millivoltage down to 90. And like I said, this is all almost instantaneous. So once we have repolarization, pretty soon we have another depolarization, and that happens again trillions of times. But it's important to remember that there are a lot of significantly smaller things going on to get the big picture. So, this super complicated diagram kind of puts everything together and also shows us the pressure changes that take place in the heart. So remember I talked about the atrial, ventricular, and semilunar valves. These pressure changes kind of reflect the activity of those valves. And we're going to mostly be referring to the semilunar valves because those valves are responsible for sending blood through the rest of the body. Whereas the AV valves are responsible for sending blood from region to region of the heart. So as we see on the far left of this graph, and bear with me, this is about to be an adventure. So on the far left of this graph, we see the P wave kind of taking place at the very bottom. We see the volume of blood, which is this red line, ebbing and flowing. And then we see the pressure changes in light of that. So P wave, if you remember, signals atrial contraction, but it doesn't happen instantly. It does that's not how it works. So P wave, atrial contraction, and from there, sometime after that, we see the volume of blood increasing in the ventricles. We also see a slight pressure change here. So mechanically, blood in the atria are pouring down into the ventricle or whatever is left because we have to get all of it out of the atria to the ventricle so we can send it through the rest of the body. So after this P wave, there is atrial contraction and the volume of blood in the heart increases or in the ventricles increase. The pressure here is still low. From here, this is where the QRS complex comes into play. From once we see a QRS complex on an ECG, soon after that, we see ventricular contraction. And ventricular contraction has to be done so we can send blood through the rest of the heart. So QRS complex pops up. Pressure in the heart is going pretty high. It's going to reach about 120 millimeters of mercury before the valves, or the semilunar valves open and shoot that blood through the rest of the body. But just remember that we have to have a QRS complex first. We have to have ventricular depolarization first. So ventricular depolarization, increase in pressure, and then after that, we have a genuine contraction that opens up those valves and sends blood through the rest of the body. It's quite awesome, and it is definitely reflected in that decrease in blood volume in the heart. So that shoots down, down, down as the heart is trying to get all that blood or as much blood as possible to the rest of the body. There's a lot of things we could also dive into with this diagram, but I wanted to show you guys the big picture. And, soon after that, um, like I brought up, we have to have a T wave, which represents ventricular repolarization. The heart's relaxing and it needs to relax so it can fill up with blood again, so we can see this whole system happen again. So once we have the T wave, you can see that pressure in the heart decreases, but also that blood volume slowly increases in the heart, which is really, really, really cool. So this is the big picture of the cardiac cycle. There are a whole lot of other details, but I wanted to give you guys a bird's eye view. So yeah, thank you for paying attention. I am open to questions in the comments, and also references can be made available upon request. So thank you for your time.